Hello and welcome to Doing Business in Asia, and welcome Andrew Martin. Thank you so much for being with us today and making yourself available to us and to this audience who is ever so interested in the real and the tangible, the real business examples of business across such an important region. So Andrew, you have a long-standing career and commitment to Hendrickson, I believe since the 1990s, and with a very fast and steep career from product support and quality to engineering to MD Asia Pacific, and then since 2013, I believe, Vice President International Operations. So you're covering a lot of ground and a lot of regional scale and scope as well. Hendrickson serves the needs of commercial vehicle industry, I believe, trucks, tractor, trailer type of suspensions. That's and right. I had the privilege to come into your offices a few times and actually look at the real thing. So all of that is very impressive, and at the same time also so important for just industries such as logistics, everything that has to do with supply chains and bringing the products here and there. So really it's sort of a core business of moving goods across the country. I believe there's suspensions and bumpers and all sorts of things. If you could just tell us a little bit more about that and Hendrickson and what your role is.
Sure, Gabrielle, and thank you for having me. I've been lucky enough to be with Hendrickson for just on 25 years now in numerous technical and commercial roles, with the company and prior to that. Hendrickson started in 1913 in the commercial vehicle space. In fact, in 1913 manufacturing vehicles, but that transitioned, not that long after that in 1926 when Magnus Hendrickson invented the first load-sharing walking beam suspension, and that's been our core competence ever since. Our Asia Pacific operation commenced in 1973, and our current owners, the Bowler Company, purchased the company in 1978. So today we serve the commercial transportation industry, as you said, with suspension systems, axles and braking systems, and really the core to that is the improvement of productivity, safety and profitability for our customers. My role within that framework is really to support our business units outside of our home market, being the USA.
So that covers Asia, Asia Pacific, and many other locations finally as well. And that viewpoint is going to be really interesting for our viewers as well. But let's first focus really on Asia and then maybe draw a few comparisons with other markets that you're looking at.
Sure.
As well. I wonder what the overall global organization is actually looking like in the organizational structure. How does Asia Pacific fit into those international operations?
Okay, well, if you put it within the context of Hendrickson being a privately owned 100-year plus company, headquartered in Chicago, and we're a very large privately owned company. Since we're private, operational matters are typically quite private, but I can tell you our revenues in the billions and employees are in the thousands. So if you put that within the context then of who we support and how we support, that might give you a little more context. And our customers are really stratified. So we supply or see our customer base as being three distinct groups. So you have the original equipment manufacturer, so that the group that typically makes the truck or trailer or commercial vehicle. The dealer who then wholesales, if you like, that vehicle on behalf of the OEM and then distributes it to the fleet. So, so the dealer network ultimately sells and supports the vehicles to the fleets. And the fleets are those who use the commercial vehicle as a tool of the trade.
Right.
And that can vary from one truck through to fleets of hundreds or even thousands of vehicles. So you put that within our customer base context,
yeah,
then kind of roll forward that as we move outside of North America, that customer pyramid, if you like, still exists, but it can be flatter or taller depending on the market and how that market's structured. And a lot of that's got to do with sort of the history of the introduction of commercial vehicles into that market.
Okay, so that's something that is product driven. Is that what is behind it, or customer segmentation driven?
It's typically down to how fragmented the market is and how the history of truck builders. Some of them have evolved from being coach builders. Some of them have evolved from being car builders, and the rate of growth plays a big role in that. So if you look at markets like India and China, long haul commercial transportation is a reasonably young industry, so they've grown up very, very quickly. Yeah, and that creates some of that speed to market or speed to that place in the industry has been a key driver as to why some of that fragmentation may or may not have happened.
Yeah, interesting. And so does that mean that depending on the degree of fragmentation of the market and that history of your client pool, finally, can you somewhat cluster particular regions or locations for the sake of your own oversight of those markets? Is that possible?
Yeah, so we're effectively anywhere where commercial vehicles are built. And if you were to line up the largest market to the smallest market, we support almost all of those. Some markets simply assemble. Some markets manufacture from scratch. And there are many cases where we are supportive of both those. But of course, that changes the supply model or the business model to support that industry. So our structure is typically driven by the regional strategy that we have relative to those markets. So we effectively follow our customers. The structure depends entirely on really how value is to be created for them and for us. And where really the product and the application development might best occur. And then this integrates with our supply chain model. So they're the things that really have the biggest impact. And of course, a key philosophy of ours is the decentralization of the decision making relative to that. So we give a lot of autonomy to our regional operations to support.
That means that you're overseeing everything international. That probably also means that in the home market, that is a self-standing and rather separate oversight, which might have a slightly different strategy.
Yeah, and it's more to do with the go-to-market strategy and the supporting of the market strategy. Okay. That said, the core technology is created in our technology hubs, which are the most part in the USA.
All right.
But the regions play a role and for sure have a voice in developing that technology.
Yeah. So what's the contribution of Asia when it comes to research and development, innovation, etc.? Do you have any examples of that?
Not necessarily examples, but maybe if I can talk you through how we do that. So yes. The core technology is centrally created. Of course, the regions play a role and have a voice in helping define the need, if you like.
Yeah.
And the regional business units have a strong technical base, and that's to help capture the voice or the need of the customer, and then they feed that back into the mothership, if you like, as part of our value and technology creation.
So you mentioned India, for example, particular things that come out of the needs of Indian clients might actually cross-fertilize to what is being developed in the US and then distributed elsewhere in the world, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, wonderful. You also mentioned that it depends on different locations, sort of the context and the heritage of the sector, whether you rather produce there, assemble there, etc. Can you give us a bit of an idea of how that actually functions across the Asian region? So how would you basically determine in which country you rather use assembly versus?
Well, yeah, so that's the really underpinnings are really what the technology is, and what the market growth and market opportunity is, and also what our customers are doing. So there might be a country like Thailand that has a hybrid model where some components are made locally, but to the most part, the vehicle is assembled based on what we call CKD or semi-knockdown model, where almost a kit is provided to the factory. And that's a model where we supply the technology via Japan typically to help support the Thailand and also the Vietnamese market, but Thailand mostly through that methodology. Or China is different again because the volumes are more sustainable and the model that the customer has in that location actually construct from scratch, and the volumes justify the capital investment relative to that.
So across the Asian locations, which market would you say at this moment in time is the biggest growth market for Hendrickson?
It's hard to go past both India and China for the sheer size of the market. China is obviously a very, very large market. In fact, it's the largest commercial vehicle market in the world, followed by India and then Europe and America. So, and that's cyclical. We have various ups and downs in all of those markets, but it's really hard to see China slowing down for some time to come.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you and your teams decide to go from one market into another one, geographically speaking, into a new location, what drives your decisions? How do you run that? And your thinking is obviously around, okay, do we actually fully invest? Do we go through partnership, merger and acquisition? Is it more of an assembly type of partnership, etc.? Can you give us some insights into that?
Sure. The simplest way I can put it for us is it's never about spending the money. It's always about the quality of the investment. So all of the investment modes that you can imagine are options. It's really, for us, it's about the market and the best steps to entry that's important to us. So it's not the financing that drives the decision making. And sometimes speed, but typically we take a very long-term view of this. So you might see our preference is for wholly owned, but the market and the strategic imperative really drive the pathway. So that the investment modes really, from a corporate point of view, is not prescriptive, but really thought-driven. So the many layers of complexity of the market, customers, product technology, supply chain optimization, talent, culture, they all make it really difficult for us to be formula-driven. So if I can maybe give you a couple of examples, in India, we've got a joint venture. And that's really driven by the complexity of the market and the dominance of a few big players relative to our customers. And we were able to really partner up with a quality partner. But you take China, on the other hand, that was as complex but completely different. And we decided to go it alone and be a wholly owned foreign enterprise. And a big part of that decision making was the ability to contain IP protection as a significant issue at that point in time.
So, Andrew, with this great diversity across this region of Asia and just this amazing diversity that you also need to somehow transpose your business across when it comes to supply chain, for example, can you give us any examples about issues, challenges that you might have come across with your teams and how you will have solved those?
Sure. We're perhaps a little bit different here, Gabrielle. We don't necessarily move a lot of product across boundaries. We really take a very regional and decentralized view, especially when considering the supply chain. So we're in most of the markets we're in to support those markets, not necessarily to find a cheap place to manufacture for somewhere else. So we're in Asia for Asia. That's probably the best way I can put it. But as far as issues go, when you do either cross-border or even slightly cross-border, currency fluctuations and protectionism and even hurdles such as tariffs become really, really important. So some of the financial or economic management of protecting from the volatility that those things have, and as you've seen, particularly between the US and China, for example, tariffs have fluctuated quite wildly, and foreign exchange between all countries has fluctuated quite wildly. A really good, very recent example is geopolitics. If you take the border skirmishes between India and China, even though it may not necessarily have yet turned into tariffs or tariff changes, some real parochialism is being built in. So things like moving freight off wharfs has become dependent on its source. So, clearances in those locations may take longer than would normally occur simply because of their source.
Yeah, and do you also see that, I suppose, across Asia, depending on if particular locations are part of ASEAN, for example, or not? I would imagine that you do feel a certain amount of integration that facilitates at least some of those movements, right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, Gabrielle. We've considered the ASEAN grouping and the simplification of what in theory should happen.
Yeah.
But I've got to say that hasn't been tangible to us. It hasn't generated significant advantage or disadvantage or easy or more difficult. It's really, relatively, opaque. There's no standout there.
So compared to other parts of the world in which you're overseeing the operations and leading Hendrickson's activities, you seem to be saying that market integration can still grow across Asia to facilitate that cross-border trade, right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And again, the two biggest issues are foreign exchange and tariffs.
And the tariffs. Yeah, absolutely. Turning to something else, turning to COVID-19. So of course, amongst everything that has to do with international business risks, that one, not many saw it coming as it actually did hit business. Can you speak a little bit about that risk management and how all of this has unfolded for Hendrickson and for your role in particular?
Sure. This is quite interesting, Gabrielle. Clearly COVID-19 is unique, and you've heard politicians use this as an excuse, with statements like there's no playbook for this and it's a once in a 100-year event, so, and their ways of protecting themselves from really quality decision making. But broadly speaking, I've got to say I do reject this. I've not found a playbook for any one day of my career so far. So to me, COVID is another complex challenge, really requiring clear thinking, problem solving, strategic insight, and great leadership. And as business leaders, this should be our core competency. Our job is to build and support teams who are capable of dealing with complexity and uncertainty every day. So building, coaching and growing teams of really smart people to manage every business, both in and out of Asia, is what we need to do. So, remembering that every business has opportunities and risks. So, my recommendation for any Asian business, in fact, any business, is to build great teams with a great culture, COVID or no COVID, and you're in the best possible position to deal with some of the chaos that comes from that.
Yeah, that's a great insight and recommendation for our viewers. So, Andrew, in terms of customer centricity, I know Hendrickson is a particularly attentive company when it comes to adapting products and services to the customer's needs. I wonder if you could just give us a couple of examples that highlight challenges or particular opportunities that you've come across with your teams in Asia, and how that segmentation that you referred to earlier actually is helpful in dealing with those.
Sure, that's an interesting question, and it's really quite a difficult one to answer because it's really hard for me to separate from the fundamentals of really what we do as as a key or core part of our culture. So we've got an entire business methodology that has as its center, if you like, the connecting of customer needs with our existing technologies and future technology roadmap. So, we call this entire system, we call it application engineering, and it's quite elaborate, and it's decentralized. So again, the core technology is created through a different process, but we've got a system of capturing customer needs and connecting it to to our product technology or roadmap, and that roadmap can go out more than 10 years. So as we enter new markets, our challenge is in the interpretation and the understanding of those customer needs. And because of the specialization and the technical complexity of really the science, these markets may not necessarily understand what it is they even want or realize, what the trade-off that's required to deliver on any specific need. And these needs that customers may not necessarily even know or recognize that they have. So if you really many of our patented technologies over the last 100 years have been solution to problems that many of our customers don't realize that they've even had. And when we do that, this is when we're really leapfrogging the state of the art. Again, and so as we enter with new technology in a developing market, a big part of the challenge lies in the understanding the market has of the technology or its benefits. So, and an important aspect of the market development strategy, if you like, is the transfer of insight through training. And we often need to help educate the market. So in this training, doing it sensitively is a really critical part of the Asian challenge.
And that's something that, so I understand this decentralization that of course makes that particular country knowledge so crucial, doesn't it?
Yes.
Is there some learning within the company then, or within the region, where your teams from one country would speak to teams of others and sort of cross-fertilize their thinking about the customer and what the needs are?
Definitely. And if you can imagine, Gabrielle, under your scenario where you have a group of people who understand the market and the culture intimately, and the business culture, because that's different again. And then a group of people who understand the core technology and the depth of the science intimately. And having a method to bridge that and then collaboratively communicate that to the customers is really, really crucial. And we've got quite a sophisticated way of doing that within a matrix structure. So there are people who have technology creation as a core job, but somewhere in the matrix they're connected to a customer education deliverable or a customer communication deliverable, and that's a huge challenge because there's a lot of complexity there, and as you know, with a matrix structure is a real risk of competing needs and competing reporting and competing expectations, and one of the things you'll hear me talk about a lot is culture, and that's really, without a great culture you can't do those things within that complex structure.
So making sure that there is the metrics and that people talk to each other and that people in different locations talk to each other, that is something that propulses even more that company culture, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So how would we be able to imagine that, say, your teams in India and your teams in China or Malaysia? How would they intersect other than through the reporting lines?
Yeah, so for us, knowledge sharing and in fact teaching, coaching, mentoring across business units and geographies is a combination of robust systems and culture. So by systems I mean structured, repeatable, very deliberate sharing, and we have a range of forums that occur annually and biannually that really bring the world together to share experiences and learnings. But culture is a lot more difficult, right? It's a lot tougher one to explain as it relates, back to your question. Knowledge, problem sharing is something that really happens organically, when there's a real relationship with a depth of connection, between the individual. In the team, there is very much a real and intentional and ongoing attempt by our leadership to create opportunities for the bonding that you need for these relationships to grow. And it might seem strange, but fun and humor and even across very different cultures has been a super effective way for us to do that. And whether it's food or a glass of wine, all of those things connect into that. So we're really lucky. We've got a leadership team and an environment where people, are central, and growing this aspect of a culture is a very conscious deliverable for us. And if I put that back to your earlier COVID question, right? COVID's I've got a really good COVID example where the businesses all responded to lockdown in each global location. We took the view that the local management had all the tools to make intelligent decisions based on their set of circumstances. So each business unit have independently developed their own COVID plan, and all except one pulled together almost identical business continuity and workplace safety plans, but with their cultural and legal variations. And that only happens with great culture. Yeah.
Wonderful. I was going to ask you more about culture, but I think you covered it all. That is such a good example, and interesting to see that there would be those similarities, yet a fine tuning depending on the national culture as well. Yeah. So, Andrew, what further advice would you give to those viewers who might start with doing business in Asia or might be in Asia and just want to accelerate across the region?
Look, I think it's for sure important to have a level of cultural empathy. But I think, I also believe it's important that as an organisation and a business, you stick to your core brand values. Entering Asia, it's very easy to be drawn towards the market's ideals of what value is. So when we look at our brand values and what our value proposition is, we try extremely hard to remain authentic to that. It's very, very tempting to erode that, to hit a price target or to lower performance expectations.
So really the authenticity and the core contribution that finally you're bringing to the market, and your understanding probably also, as you're saying, of the different cultures and the different ways of dealing with that.
Yeah, that's right. It's this temptation of trying too hard to be, Asian, whatever that means. So I'm really saying, don't dilute your strategic value. Have empathy and understanding of how Asia works. That's language, that's culture, that's customs. Absolutely, you've got to be respectful of this, but remain true to what the product or service really stands for.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, that's been impressive insights. Thank you so much, Andrew. Andrew Martin, Vice President of International Operations at Hendrickson, Hendrickson Asia Pacific. Thank you so much for your time and sharing this with us.
You're more than welcome.